Hey, y'all, each week on The Sam Sanders Show from KCRW, we ask big questions and share hot takes about the pop culture we love.
Now that we have YouTube, we don't need any more biopics. If they've been alive such that I can watch them on YouTube, I don't need it.
I don't think that music is getting worse. I think y'all just don't listen to artists who aren't in the mainstream.
Taylor Swift, retire. It's time to retire.
The Sam Sanders Show from KCRW, wherever you get your podcast, and on YouTube.
You're listening to Life in 7 Songs, where some of the world's most fascinating people talk about the transformative moments in their lives and the songs that helped them through. From the San Francisco Standard, I'm Sophie Behrman. Joining us this week is Lord Norman Foster, the world-famous starchitect who's been shaping skylines for 6 decades. You've quite possibly stood inside his buildings, or at the very least seen them in photographs. London's Wembley Stadium, New York's Hearst Tower, and California's Apple Park are just some of his designs. Norman's success wasn't guaranteed. He didn't finish high school and grew up in working-class Manchester in the 30s, when university wasn't an obvious choice. Yet, he's known as one of the most radical architects of the 20th century for bucking long-standing architectural traditions. Lord Norman Foster, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So one of the first questions I'd love to get out of the way is, do you prefer Lord or Sir? And can you tell me about receiving those distinguished titles?
They're really quite separate. I was honored with a knighthood, so I became Sir Norman. And subsequently, I was elected as a baron to the House of Lords, so I am Lord Foster. Outside of the UK, the distinctions are perhaps not so clear.
But both such an honor, and both of them involving the Queen, of course, right?
Of course, yes.
So, Lord Foster, then, you're known for reinventing and really vastly improving what some might at least initially think of as sort of mundane spots, industrial workplaces, offices, airports. Did you spend a lot of time in those sorts of spaces as a child, or did your parents?
My childhood really was a working class suburb of Manchester, and Manchester is an industrial city. And so my world was a local library, a high street, which was a shopping street, and an industrial suburb. And of course, during that time, my father had been a soldier in the First World War, so he was enlisted as a security guard in an aircraft factory.
Tell me about your mother a little bit then. What did she do?
My mother was a housewife, and later in life she was a waitress in a cafe not too far from home.
Parents who it sounds like were very hardworking.
Extraordinarily hardworking, inspirational in that sense, very strong work ethic, very loving, very caring. I was extremely fortunate.
Is there a song that you think of when you picture your mother and father?
My first recall of music was a record, a love song that my father played on a gramophone, a wind-up gramophone. It was called I'll Walk Beside You, and it was by an Irish-American tenor, John McCormack. And I can still remember the words. I'll walk beside you through the passing years,
through days of cloud and sunshine, joy.
I can remember smatterings of it.
And when the great call comes, the sunset gleams.
I'm almost to tears. It has an extraordinary meaning for me in terms of those who I was fortunate to benefit from their love. I owe great debts to my parents, and it's just a very moving memory.
I think you and I have something in common. Perhaps when we hear music, we're very moved.
Very moved.
It's so beautiful how it can do that. So what were your teenage years like?
Fairly typical, really. I left school at 16.
Really? Was that typical?
Leaving school at 16 was very much about the area that I grew up in. So it was absolutely normal. University was something that I discovered myself much later.
And what'd you do after you left school?
So perhaps unlike many going into manual work, I didn't go into manual work, but I went into white collar, went to Manchester Town Hall, where I worked as an office boy, a clerk, for 2 years in the city treasurers in the town hall. And I have recall of some of the most minute details of that building, extraordinary spaces, and a great statement of civic pride, very emblematic of that Victorian period. Every lunchtime, I'd be walking the streets, discovering buildings, and this interest in buildings, in architecture, in urban spaces, arcades, shortcuts. It was almost like a hobby. The idea that I might actually end up in that world was totally remote at that time, but it made a deep impression. I certainly discovered that the city treasurers, that was not my future.
Is there a song that takes you back to that time?
The age of 18 is marked by the premiere of a work, a symphony, which related to my discovery during that period at Manchester Town Hall. Not too far away, a short distance, was the Free Trade Hall and the Halley Orchestra led by Sir John Barbarolli. I remember the premiere of Vaughan Williams' Symphony No. 7, the Antarctica. That was another perhaps musical moment.
I can just see you sort of leaving Manchester Town Hall, taking however many steps over to the Free Trade Hall and enjoying this incredible orchestra. I mean, take me back to hearing it for the first time. What did it fire up in you? What did it awaken?
The music was, if I close my eyes, it almost conjures up images of the icebergs, the frozen wastes. It's highly cinematic. The grandeur of mountains, the awe, the power of natural forces, of the elements.
Clearly, from a young age, you were inspired by different physical spaces. How did you start to turn this hobby into a career?
I got a job in the world of contract management, going around building sites. And because I'd been so, as it were, at a personal interest in the world of architecture, I plucked up courage to ask a young assistant in the drawing office what he thought of Frank Lloyd Wright. And he looked at me and I realized at that point that this young architect, he didn't know who Frank Lloyd Wright was.
So I'm guessing this made you think maybe you could do what he's doing.
Well, it was a kind of awakening moment, and that led me to start to talk to people in the drawing office and say, how do you become an architect? And the response was, well, you present a portfolio. So I put a portfolio together by using gouache, charcoal, to create images of industrial Manchester, painting the view from outside my bedroom window, and decided that in the coming months I would seek a place in a school of architecture. But first I felt I should tell the boss that I was working for. And he said, but to do that you need a portfolio. And I said, well, I have a portfolio. So he said, I think you should bring it to show me tomorrow. So the next day I knocked on his door. I showed him the portfolio, And immediately I was elevated to the drawing office.
But even so, you still wanted that architecture degree.
So, everybody said quite rightly that it would be a waste of time because I didn't have the qualifications for a university, having left school at 16. But I was interviewed by the Professor Cordingley, and the end of the interview, he said something along the lines, well, obviously, we can't give you a degree, but what we could do is you could do the degree course like everybody else, and at the end of it, we'll give you a piece of paper which says diploma instead of degree. And that was great. The bad news was that when I went to get a grant from the education authorities, they made the point that I wasn't studying for a degree, and therefore I couldn't get a grant. So I did many things on the side.
Odd jobs, you mean?
Exactly, yes. I worked in a bakery, I worked in a garage, I worked in a furniture shop, I worked in a cold store for Wall's Ice Cream. You'd empty a huge trailer of metal boxes full of ice cream bars, and you'd push them into a cold store through a hatch. It was the fastest way of earning a lot of money in a short time.
Did these odd jobs, these experiences inform your drive to improve the workplace?
I never made that connection, but of course, many of the influences are subliminal. Certainly, the industrial workplace was pretty horrific, and so you didn't have to do much to improve it, but I had the opportunity as an architect working with the dockers in Dockland in London docks to do at that time the absolute unthinkable, which was to put the dockers together with management in the same building. And by the locals, I was given every reason why that would not work. The dockers were dirty, they'd swear, the secretaries would be offended, the secretaries would leave. You couldn't mix these two classes. And there was also a distrust on the part of the dockers of management, not surprisingly, given the history of industrial relations in the docks, where people would queue for a day's work.
I have these sketches in front of me that I just want to bring up because I see phrases that you wrote, in hand, in pen. Management box and the workers' shed. The distinctions between we and they. Posh and scruffy. Clean and dirty. The back and the front. And it just seems so wonderfully radical for that era. Was anyone doing that before you came up with that?
Not to my knowledge. And the only way that we realized the project was that I became the representative of management. And I was the negotiator with the unions. And I became very, very good friends of the union leader. So there's an interesting inversion here. My primary role as an architect in those early years on this project, our first project, was as a negotiator. My role as an architect followed. It was a secondary role. But then that building attracted a huge amount of attention. It was quite revolutionary in terms of its technology, its materials, and obviously the social dimension.
So you proved everyone wrong, the skeptics wrong at least.
Collectively, yes.
Is there a song that brings you back to that time in your early 20s?
Well, to anybody growing up in the industrial North, America was really where everything was happening. And West Side Story was explosive. I mean, it's difficult to capture the contrast, the drama, the power of seeing that. And the opening itself was very dramatic. It's really about the menace, the tension of what eventually becomes the rivalry between the gangs. It is also about the mosaic, the background of New York, the grittiness, the urbanity.
You mentioned America being sort of the it place. Tell me about the first time you went overseas or the first time you visited America. What was your impression of it?
And towards the end of my 5-year course in Manchester, I applied for a Henry Fellowship, which was tenable at Yale or Harvard. And I opted for Yale because at that time, Paul Rudolph had taken over as dean, and his work, principally his early works in Sarasota, were radical. I mean, they were really very fresh, different in exciting ways, use of materials, the way in which he responded to the climate, created shade. I remember the first break in the course, we went to New York. We were in, it must have been a kind of beer hall. A lot of young people were drinking beer around an open space in the center. And the music erupted and everybody got up and they started gyrating. It was the twist.
Come on, baby, let's do the twist. Come on, baby, let's
Did you get up and dance?
Of course. Nostalgia time. It was an extraordinarily dramatic moment, and which was absolutely normal in New York, in America at that time, but it hadn't found its way across to Europe. So the twist, Chubby Checker, that was a defining moment musically.
And we'll hear more of Lord Norman Foster's defining moments after this quick break. Stay with us. Hey everyone, I want to recommend a podcast. Hard Knocks is a show about resilience, self-discovery, and finding meaning after chaos, hosted by Amanda Knox. Each week, Amanda sits down with fascinating guests, writers, thinkers, artists, to explore how we learn, grow, and rebuild ourselves after life knocks us down. Amanda brings humor, honesty, and hard-earned perspective to every conversation, drawing on her own experience of being wrongfully convicted and rebuilding her life. Amanda was a guest on Life in 7 Songs in one of our most moving episodes, opening up about how music became a lifeline during her years of wrongful imprisonment. On our show, she spoke candidly about turning pain into wisdom and also about how we're all so much more than our worst moments. If you liked that episode, you'll love her show, available wherever you listen to podcasts.
I'm Jesse Alejandro Cottrell.
And I'm Emily Dreyfus, and this is Pacific Standard Time.
We have stories from all over the state of California, all the big battles that are happening here.
Prop 50,
housing affordability,
tech,
and immigration.
And we're really excited to bring you the stories about how California is dealing with what it means to be alive in 2025.
Subscribe to Pacific Standard Time, a new weekly show from the San Francisco Standard.
We'll have new episodes every Wednesday starting November 19th, wherever you get your podcasts.
So, Lord Norman Foster, you have designed countless offices, bridges, airports, city halls, so much more in your lifetime. So many that we can't begin to discuss them all. So instead, I want to ask, what is your most memorable or impactful experience of designing a building in your life?
With some difficulty, if I had to single out one building, it's the Reichstag in Berlin. This was essentially a zero-carbon building.
Yeah, so for people who don't know, this is a project that you completed in the 1990s, not to build anew, but to restore Germany's parliament building, the Reichstag, which was important at the time for Germany's healing, a remembrance of its past, but also a a celebration of its status as a united democratic country.
As we peeled away the layers of history from the 60s, I think we realized that it had the imprints of war, graffiti, the scars of war, and rather than try to sanitize, to homogenize, to cleanse that, we felt it was important that it was retained for future generations, that fabric was more powerful than any reconstruction in a museum. In that sense, it was a living evidence of the history of the past, the transition from war to peace.
And in particular, the building you came up with is celebrated for its massive glass dome, which visitors can stand in and watch the German parliament in action, which is radical. It's basically like being able to stand in a dome on top of the U.S. Capitol and watch Congress.
It created a public space on the roof, which makes it the most visited parliament because you really can ascend. It's become emblematic of the city, also symbolic of a reunified Berlin. So I think it's a building on many levels. It creates a new relationship where the public are symbolically above the debating chamber of the politicians who are answerable to the public. So that, I think, for that mixture of reasons would be one building that I would single out.
Just such a forward-thinking concept. What's been the happiest moment of your life, or one of the happiest moments of your life?
Meeting my wife.
What's her name?
Elena. We met in 1992 at a dinner party in Toledo. And I remember perhaps a favorite piece of music, John Lewis, later in his life, his interpretation of jazz and Bach is very special. And I remember sharing that in the early weeks of our coming together. Amazing.
How do you feel when you hear that?
Moved by its associations.
Thinking about meeting your wife.
Yes.
And your love for her. What about your next song from the opera King Arthur?
It was Elena sharing her favorite excerpt from a favorite opera, and my immediately responding to it as if I selected it myself. I mean, it was just so inevitable.
This is the cold song from the frost scene in the third act.
Let me freeze again. Let me.
It's so powerful. It's so evocative. It's so strong. It's one of those spiritual pieces. I think there are powerful links between the world of architecture, between music, between film, and somehow they all are about the spirit.
You've talked about architecture being both the material and the spiritual, which is exactly what you're saying. Tell me just a little bit more about that.
I'm often asked, what is the most important? Is it the way that something looks, how it feels, or is it the function, how it works? And the assumption in that question is that how it works is about whether the water comes out of the tap, whether the light comes out of the ceiling, whether it's good heating, good cooling. But I'd argue that an essential part of the function is how it makes us feel. Does it lift our spirits? We know that a patient recovering from surgery, if that patient is in a room with a view as opposed to facing a brick wall, that patient will leave hospital earlier. As a designer, I'd say it's not about either or. all of those things should be integrated. That's the essence of good design.
I couldn't call this interview complete without asking about Apple Park, because I'm interviewing you out of San Francisco and because it's another example of reforming and reinventing the workplace. Apple Park, for those who have never seen it, is Apple's campus in Cupertino, completed in 2018. And the main building is one giant circle or ring with this incredible interior courtyard full of trees. What's your favorite story to tell from working on that project?
Well, it was working directly with Steve Jobs. The circle looks almost as if it was a sort of instant gesture. It was anything but. The earliest studies were all very curvilinear, and it was only at a point of crisis when I remember Steve saying, every project needs a crisis. We have to take advantage of it. And it was at that point that the project morphed into the circle. That must have been 6 or 7 months into the project. So that circular image enclosing the big green space with the landscape outside, recreating the California landscape, the fruit basket of Steve Jobs' youth growing up, that was the moment.
So it wasn't this eureka moment right away.
The eureka moment is invariably the culmination of a slog. It's almost like the finishing line at the end of a marathon. In this case, the geometry of the circle, there was a synergy between its presence in the landscape and its internal planning.
People say it looks a little bit like a spaceship.
All of the newspapers, the periodicals, the reporting, repetitiously, they all, the mothership has landed, we have liftoff. It was all the terminology of space. And for me, that's very satisfying because space and the world of flight has always been a kind of part of my life, particularly flying.
Because you fly your own planes.
In the past, yes. Immersed in it, yes.
So your last song, how does that fit into your story?
If I started with a love song, and that love song, which my father played on a record player, that it was a kind of ode to my mother, then I'd end on an ode to Elena, a love song.
Bésame Mucho, which translates to kiss me a lot.
Bésame, bésame mucho, como si fuera esta noche la última vez.
That's the one.
And I read that it's one of the most recorded and covered songs in Spanish of all time. The version we're hearing is by Andrea Bocelli.
And an amazing interpretation.
Lord Norman Foster, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Life in 7 Songs is a production from the San Francisco Standard. This episode was produced by me, Sophie Behrman, and our senior producer, Jasmine Morris. Our executive producers are Griffin Gaffney and John Steinberg. Nate Toby is our creative consultant. This episode was mixed by Michelle Lanz. Our theme music is by Kate Davis and Zubin Hensler. And Clark Miller created our show art. Our music consultant is Sarah Tembekshian. Our studio engineer is Sean McKenna at Pure Mind Studios, and Serge Krebs was our on-site engineer. You can find this guest's full playlist at sf.news/Spotify. Thanks for listening.